Hello everyone, this is Deborah Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. If you are looking for vendor process training for you or your entire vendor team, head over to my site at deborahrrichardson.com and click on the Vendor Team Training Solved button to learn more about what is included in the monthly or annual plan and also to download a 2021 training schedule. Get the training that you and your team needs to avoid payment fraud, duplicate vendors, compliance fines, and more. It's October, and that means it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Do you know your phishing defenses? Keep listening. Welcome to episode 157. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. 3 fundamentals for shoring up phishing defenses. So, for the third time, it seems like in a row, I am saying October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And last week was the first week. And if you want to check out episode 156, I kind of talk all about the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, where it came from, and really how it could help the vendor team specifically. So check out episode 156 from last week. Now, week 2, which is this week, the week of October 11th, the focus is Fight the Phish, and that is spelled Phish, so Fight the Phish. And the National Cybersecurity Alliance, or NCSA, in collaboration with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, or CISA, they provided the content that I'm going to include in this podcast for all of their Cybersecurity 2021 champions like myself to share, because it's all about making everyone aware of the fraud that is out there and the fraud trends, especially around phishing, since that is a significant trend or a significant increase in the trend since the pandemic, which we've been going through for the last 18 months. And actually even before then, but it's one of the highest ones that have increased as a result of that chaos with working from home or abruptly working from home and other workarounds to deal with the fact that we were not all in the office together. And I know some of you still are either working hybrid or still working fully remote. So I love sharing content that is intentional for fraud awareness. And so I hope you love their 3 fundamentals. So starting off from ransomware to SolarWinds, the cybersecurity space has been as hectic as ever. As it's ever been over the last 12 to 24 months. However, for all of the emerging threats and news that are cropping up on the horizon, phishing, one of the oldest pain points in cybersecurity, is continuing to quietly wreak havoc and is as big of a threat as it's ever been. Now, despite often being overlooked in terms of hype, phishing has been a mainstay in the cybersecurity threat landscape for decades. Wow, I didn't know it was for decades, but I guess more than one decade, which would take you back to the 2000s, is sufficient. So that's right. Just never thought about it. But anyway, 43% of cyber attacks in 2020 featured phishing or pretexting, while 74% of U.S. organizations experienced a successful phishing attack last year alone. That means that phishing is one of the most dangerous action varieties to an organization's cybersecurity health. And as a result, the need for proper anti-phishing hygiene and best practices is an absolute must. So with that in mind, here are their quick best practices, and there are 3 of them, and tips for dealing with phishing threats. So the first fundamental is to know the red flags. Now, fishes are a mainstay of making their content and interactions appealing, and that's true because they want you to click on the link and then put your real credentials in a spoofed website. So that's one way. But yeah, so that they want to make sure their interactions are appealing. From content design to language, it can be difficult to discern whether content is genuine or a potential threat, which is why it's so important to know the red flags. So awkward and unusual formatting, overly explicit call outs to click a hyperlink or open an attachment, and subject lines that create a sense of urgency are all hallmarks that the content you received could potentially be from a cyber criminal and indicate that it should be handled with caution. Okay, so the second fundamental is, and this should sound familiar, is verify the source. And I always talk about that with the vendor team to verify who you're getting your documentation from. I call it authentication, but it's right in line with their fundamental. Verify the source. So phishing content comes in a variety of ways. However, many fishes will try to impersonate someone that you may already know. So a cyber criminal, in the vendor process space, will try to impersonate your vendor or your leadership. So they'll try to impersonate someone you may already know, such as a colleague, a service provider, or a friend. And this happens on social media all the time. As a way to trick you into believing their malicious content is actually trustworthy. But don't fall for it. If you sense any red flags that something may be out of place or unusual, reach out directly to the individual to confirm whether the content is authentic and safe. If it's not, break off communication immediately and flag the incident through the proper channels. And on that note, I hope you all have or know if your company has a route to take when you've been or when you identify a suspicious email, somewhere that you can send that you can send the email or report the email so that it can be investigated further. And if you don't know if your company has that, please reach out to your leadership, to your IT team, to your InfoSec team, being the information security team, whatever you have or whoever handles your potential fraud or risk. Reach out to them if you don't know what that path is to report a suspected or successful fraud attempt. All right, so the third fundamental for shoring up phishing defenses is be aware of vishing, that's with a V, and other phishing offshoots. And I actually talked about vishing, and I had it on my list of the top 3 frauds that affected the vendor team for 2021, so I'm glad they're including it here. But what they say is, as more digital natives have come on online and greater awareness has been spread about phishing, bad actors have begun to diversify their phishing efforts beyond traditional email. For example, voice phishing or phishing has become a primary alternative for bad actors looking to gain sensitive information from unsuspecting individuals. And by the way, I talk about authentication. That works for phone too. And think about it, when you call your bank, they authenticate you before they talk to you. So you do the same thing with your vendors so that you can avoid these bad actors. All right, so phishing is similar to conventional phishing and is typically executed by individuals posing as a legitimate organization, such as a healthcare provider or insurer, and asking for sensitive information. So simply put, it is imperative that individuals, you and your vendor team members, be wary of any sort of communication that asks for personal information, whether it be via email, whether it's via phone or chat, and they don't mention it, but it could also be via text. So we see a lot of smishing, which is phishing via text, especially if the communication is unexpected. And I do like that. If you weren't expecting something to come through and it seems like it may be a little suspicious, then you need to make sure that you either follow up with some due diligence or report it accordingly. And make sure you break off the interaction immediately when you think it's suspicious and contact the company directly to confirm the veracity of the communications. All right, so those were the 3 fundamentals for shoring up phishing defenses that came straight from the teams that are co-leading the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And listing those 3 again, it is 1, to know the red flags, 2, to verify the source, and 3, to be aware of phishing and other phishing offshoots. And again, if you want more information on Cybersecurity Awareness Month and how it can affect the vendor team directly, please listen to episode 156. It's last week's episode where I give a background and just really dive into more detail about how it can help you in your vendor process. All right. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 157th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.